Please start the webcast. Good evening, members. My name is Councillor Harvey Cohen. I'd like to welcome you to the meeting tonight, and colleagues and officers. I'm chairing tonight's meeting, and to manage the business as efficiently as possible, I will invite people to speak one at a time to ensure their contributions are properly heard. Therefore, please do not speak unless invited to do so by me, and thank you in advance for your assistance. Agenda item 1, membership. We'd like to welcome Councillor Kaza, who is standing in for his father, Councillor P. Kaza. Agenda item 2, communications apologies. We've received apologies for absence from Councillor Prabhakar Kaza. And unfortunately, Councillor Nick Oakley has apologised tonight. She's unable to join us. So therefore, her portfolio update, which is under item 5, will therefore be given at a future meeting, and we will discuss which meeting at the end of tonight's meeting. Under the future work programme. I'd like to welcome Councillor Alan Matthews, Cabinet Member, who's here for item 6, Emily Dillon, who's our Housing Services Manager, and Maggie Benson as well. What's your official title, Maggie? Housing Options Manager, welcome. And also, obviously, Hilary Shade, Head of Partnerships and Community Engagement, who's here for both items 6 and 7. Agenda item 3, declarations of interest. Do any members have any interest to declare? There are none. So agenda item 4, the minutes of the 21st of January 2025 approved as a correct record. Okay, I will sign them. So agenda item 5, as I said, because Councillor Oakley is not here, we're not going to have this item today, so we're going to move straight to agenda item 6. And Councillor Matthews, we will give you a little bit of extra time as you asked. We have got more time tonight. So we're here to receive an update and ask questions from the Housing Development and Housing Development portfolio. Over to you, Councillor Matthews.
Good, thank you. Right, we're off. Good, so you all know Emily. I'm very pleased that Maggie Benson is here today. She's served us well for 23 years with the authority. And she works in an area of huge pressure. Maggie is totally committed to ensuring the fairest possible outcome to individual needs and has led on working up a number of these policy proposals. So, thank you, Maggie. Sorry, you don't have to speak yet. And as I start, it's worth reminding you that the allocation policy says that councillors can't intervene on casework decisions. Our job is to keep the policy under review, as we're going to do tonight, and officers' job is to implement it fairly. So that's how the workload is divided. And we do have a serious housing problem, and as Maggie often reminds me, we have to rob Peter to pay Paul. So which Peter we're going to rob? You need to remember that. Okay, so we're on to the next slide. So this is what I'm going to be talking about, activity achievements, some of the issues on the housing register, how we propose to make changes, and what our future priorities are. I'm afraid that is going to take more than 4 slides, but on to the next one. So what have we been doing over the past year, or longer since I came here? As most of you know, we've been working on the empty home strategy, which went to council in April. Clearly, empty homes are a wasted resource. They peaked at nearly 1,400 homes in 2021, and it's slowly come down. We dipped under 1,000 in October. Sadly, we're now back at 1,048 at the end of January, but we're keeping the pressure on bringing that down. We've introduced the new homelessness and rough sleeping strategy, which was welcomed by all parties at full council in November, and was launched at the Homelessness Forum. And we do need to celebrate a major success in tackling homelessness, which has quadrupled over the last 4 years. Getting my figures right, wrong? Sorry, I do need to get that figure right, absolutely right. It has doubled over the last 5 years. And it is at the level that we are dealing with. In February, we had 124 approaches of homelessness. So it's ongoing, continuous, and at scale. We've avoided big increases in temporary accommodation and TA costs. We've minimised the use of bed and breakfast. We've reduced the number of rough sleepers. And all the staff in the housing department have been working together at different parts of different stages of this process to actually help achieve what has been achieved. Currently, as of last night, we had 115 families in temporary accommodation, of which 2 were in bed and breakfast. So we're keeping it at a minimum level. We introduced a new TA and procurement strategy. That provides a clear framework for how we procure and how we allocate temporary accommodation, which can be challenged. We have regular meetings with Clarion, and we're pleased to report improvements in their LCDM policy, links, condensation, damp and mould. They've brought more work in-house, they're improving response times, improving tenant satisfaction and improving casework management, which includes members' inquiries, and we'll be circulating information about how to access, how to make those inquiries. They've also introduced a right-sizing scheme, which I'll come back to later. We've been instrumental in producing a county-wide leaflet to signpost social care professionals to direct damp and mould most appropriately, to understand the scale of the problem and who to go to with that problem. We've acquired 2 new TA properties, and we've accessed funding to support 17 Afghan and 19 Ukrainian families settled in the borough who actually came under the previous government's policies. We've addressed issues of inflammable cladding and rack, reinforced, autoclaved, aerated concrete. Fortunately, it's not a huge issue in the borough, but there's one scheme that we're aware of where leaseholders are now trapped in unsellable, unmortgageable property with insurance costs which have gone up from £1,200 a year to £4,000 a year, and there was no start date in sight. Working with Herts Building Control, MHCLG and developers, we work with them to manage the risks, expedite remediation and reduce leaseholder costs. And we've achieved some success in pushing for work to start sooner and reducing insurance payments to a more manageable level. Okay, so you'll notice a few tables are going to head in your direction. I apologise for that. And I won't go through every line, but we just want to get across the scale of need in the borough. So I'll try and flick through these and not go into too much detail, but this first table actually shows for each financial year a start figure and in-year application figure, so start plus new demand minus those who've actually been rehoused, and that produces a new start figure for the following year. So it's simply interesting to see what's happening and happening by bedroom category. It's 1 bedroom at the top, at the bottom, going up to 4 bedroom, the purple at the top, where there's not much movement and not that many families, but they are still going to wait a hell of a long time before they're ever rehoused when you look at the supply. In fact, 1 so far this year, I think. Oh, no, 2. So, okay. Okay, if I go to the next table, and this is the similar information, but so the top of the section, top of the table is supply of social rented accommodation, and the bottom is affordable rent. And we've highlighted it in green to show where the supply is reasonable, and pink to show you where it's inadequate. And you can see the biggest source of supply is social housing relets. So we're dependent on people leaving, dying, whatever, moving out of the sector. And that generally is 75% of supply. But even that produces very few 3 and 4 bedroom homes. And you'll see also there that new social housing over the past 4 years has been virtually in single figures, with the exception of this year, where we had handed over 42 homes, which included a reasonable number of 3-bedroom homes and 4-bedroom homes in the Windsor Close development. The bottom of that table shows that most new build is affordable, but probably not affordable to people in the greatest need, and includes very few family 3 and 4 bedroom homes. And that's true of new build, and it's true of affordable relets. So, okay. A good supply of affordable housing in 2021, but running lower at 50 per annum in yellow. Okay, sorry. Keep on moving forward. Okay, this is just another way of explaining the situation and explaining what it actually means to people who are waiting and hoping to be rehoused. So, again, it's split. At the top of the table is home seekers, which is people on the housing register or who've been accepted as homeless. And beneath that is the social transfer, so existing social tenants who are wanting to move. And you can see we've looked at the demand, we've added on in-year demand to make a total demand figure. We've looked at supply, split between social and affordable, which we've totaled as total lettings. And we've then just compared that and written it out. So we compared total demand with total supply and put that out as a success rate figure. Now, Emily's told me lots of times this is very misleading. It doesn't mean someone has got if they're at if they're on the 36% for the 1 beds on the top, it doesn't mean they're going to wait 3 years. Some people in dire need will be housed relatively quickly. Some people with high need will still have to wait many years to be rehoused. And some people who are at the bottom in Band D or Band E will never get rehoused. But anyway, this is just giving you a clue as to what it means and the types of periods that people are waiting. And the worst is actually people who need 4-bedroom accommodation, just very little movement for people waiting for those large units. Obviously, people who need access to disabled accommodation are given high priority, but again, there are few adapted properties, adapted or adaptable properties becoming available. We operate a bidding system so people can see how their preferences for area, accommodation type can change their waiting time. And that, that's really important. If you want a 1-bedroom flat and you're happy in Borough Wood and you're happy on how many floors do we go up to? 18? If you're happy on the 18th floor, then, you're definitely going to improve your chances of being rehoused. But if you insist that you only want to live in a kind of, 1-bedroom bungalow in Bushy, I don't think you're ever going to get rehoused, So choice is absolute in determining how long people wait. But even people prepared to compromise still have to wait, and sometimes quite a long time, if in fact we house them. So I kind of made the point before that affordable housing isn't affordable for everyone, but those who can afford it could reduce their waiting time potentially if they bid on those properties, affordable housing. Okay, the next slide, again, tell me if I'm trying to blind you all with science, but I like this slide because it shows you that of the 270 social transfers who are waiting to be rehoused, what they're living in and what they need. Okay? So if you look at the yellow diagonal staircase there, those people, 41, 16, 2 and 0, are all living in the right size accommodation. So they need to move for a different reason, okay? A management transfer or whatever. But, you know, they don't need bigger or smaller accommodation. They are in the right size. The people in green, the light green people need accommodation smaller than what they're occupying. And the dark green actually have 2 spare rooms. The people in pink are overcrowded. And the people who are in, what's that, purple, red? I don't know. But as you move, as it gets darker, they're more desperate to move because they're more overcrowded. So it just shows you how desperate that situation is. In actual fact, we can see that we've got 125 overcrowded families in need of 3-bedroom accommodation. 2 are living in 1 bedroom and 123 are living in 2 bedroom at the moment. But this includes families with sex overcrowding, where there's 1, perhaps even 2 teenage kids, a boy and a girl who are having to share a bedroom, you know, which isn't particularly appropriate when you get to that age. And that group received 13 lettings last year. You know, so think of it, 13 as against 125 people who are overcrowded, and some of them grossly overcrowded, and we managed 15. So, you know, it's not moving very quickly. Also interesting on this is the fact that when you look at the under-occupiers, there's only 22. And that's surprising in itself, actually, you know, when there's 7,000 social housing units, or 8,000 in the borough. So we clearly need to do more. Firstly, to get them registered. And secondly, to actually work out how we could entice them to live in a smaller unit. Because, of course, since because they've got the, what's it called? The right to... We can't force people to move, okay? A lot of people we can't force to move. And questionably, when someone's lived somewhere for kind of 50 years, you know, do you really want to force them to move? It's a difficulty. But, okay. Right, so looking at those factors, this is what has influenced where we wanted to go on the allocation policy review. Okay, you can see it hasn't been reviewed since 2022, which is probably not that long ago, but there's still more changes we want to make. And you can see here the areas that we're looking at, what the issues that we're trying to tackle. Okay, so the first in that list is social transfers. Yep. So what we want to do is increase the priority of families with children, particularly of opposite sex, sharing a bedroom, and recognise those particular difficulties. And we also want to make better use of our existing policy, which enables us to give 25% of 3-bedroom homes to transfer, existing social transfer applications. Because it's also a win-win, because, you know, by moving somebody into a transfer, you are releasing 2-bedroom, which is of use to a smaller family. So we need to recognise that fact. There was nothing in the policy to recognise overcrowding in terms of bedroom. And so, you know, where you've got 2 kids who have to share a box room, it's still overcrowded, so we want to acknowledge that and see what difference it makes within the banding policy. We want and we need to increase the priority to people who, to encourage them to downsize, particularly where they're releasing 3- and 4-bedroom accommodation. And we actually think it's a better idea to allow them to downsize into smaller property, but even with 1 spare room. Because, you know, people don't want to move down into a 1-bedroom flat or whatever, you know, and they want their grandchildren to visit them, all this sort of thing, and they're not going to move, and you can't force them to move. So, you know, we have to be a bit more flexible in terms of our policy to encourage that to happen. And we also think we need to prioritise remaining occupants where the tenant has died, who would otherwise be homeless, some of these cases where it's a joint tenancy and the husband dies first, the woman is left behind, she will have the right to remain in occupation as a successor. But sometimes if they die in the wrong order, or if in fact the man was a sole tenant, they don't have those rights, you know. So, but we feel it's helpful to give those cases some priority because of what they're going to give us back. So that's a change we want to make. We want to prevent homelessness, so where people are, we want to introduce Band C priority. If they're in private rented accommodation with children and they're due to be evicted. To give them some assurance that something is happening. Increasing the priority even for those without children who are threatened with eviction, and again that may avoid temporary accommodation. But also to recognise a kind of community contribution of people on a low income living in the private sector who have a need to find more settled accommodation. So that's another change. I have to say that Band E priority doesn't mean a hell of a lot, but it could mean something if people are interested in low demand accommodation. We want to look at how we deal with moves for people needing family support. And we think the current restriction of 10 years residence, so if someone outside the borough has got a desperate need to live near a relative who lives inside the borough, then we currently require the relative inside the borough to have 10 years accommodation. Now, we think that that is too restrictive. There's very few cases that we accept. There's only, there's certainly not one a year who we accept on those grounds. But the cases that we accept, are really serious. It's a really justifiable case, and we don't want to reject them just because they don't fulfil the 10-year requirement. And generally, those relatives, are going to be long-standing residents in any case. But we think the 10 years for them is an artificial barrier. People over 60 wishing to move to the borough will only be allocated age-restricted accommodation because we can afford to do that, because it's sometimes a problem letting age-restricted accommodation. So actually, if we can get it filled up and get a rent coming in, it's a benefit to the borough. But I have to say, with all these support cases, we will always give priority to Hertsmere residents. There's no question about that. And we're talking about relatively few cases overall. The age-restricted criteria, there is, as I say, a reasonable supply of age-designated properties, but housing associations have increased the age criteria from 50 to 55, so we need to do the same. Because although we've got the ability to house those people, if the housing association aren't going to accept them, then there's no point as actually accepting them if they're below the age threshold. And there's no scope to house people with no defined need, except into age-designated property. So the qualifying age has to increase. And finally, we think there's a need to look at the financial eligibility criteria, and you can see what we're proposing up here. But we'd like to prevent high-earning transfer tenants moving to larger accommodation if they've got the ability, and we talk about a sizable chunk of money or income to actually go off and obtain their own accommodation. We'll review these levels in line with ONS average rent figures for Hertsmere on an annual basis. We think we have to exclude downsizing tenants from the eligibility test because otherwise they would never move. So we just have to do that because what they're in is valuable. We want to get hold of it. we're not allowed to under legislation, but we wouldn't want to take account of lump sums which are received by members of the armed forces on their retirement, or very often medical retirement. And in certain cases, we can award discretion. We will apply discretion with these financial limits to people who need financially adapted accommodation or older person accommodation, which is more available. But if someone needs very special adapted accommodation, which is going to be difficult to find, is going to be more expensive, then we'll exempt them from the eligibility clause. Okay, so where are we going into the future? Well, surprise, surprise, at the top of the list. So, big issue as to how we can actually get hold of these under-occupiers and encourage them to move. And obviously, we'll work with housing associations. There is some best practice elsewhere, and we'll be looking at how we can take that further. Clearly, we need to do what we can to produce more housing, and we need to get a better balance with more social housing. And although it doesn't say it there in the second bullet point, because we forgot them, because we actually talk to them every day, clearly the first people we're talking to about this is housing associations. But so we continue our discussions with housing associations, we talk to developers, and we do whatever we can achieve through HDL and HLL, the council's two vehicles for producing housing. Third bullet point, the Grenfell Tower report has been fairly recently published, and we need to look at that, and we need to review how we deal with our emergency planning duties and how we can improve that. But nothing stays the same forever, and there is changing legislation. So the Renters' Rights Bill is on its way. It will abolish Section 21 no-fault evictions. It will strengthen rights and protections in the private sector. It will apply decent home standards in the private sector, including effectively applying AWAB's law to make sure that homes are safe to live in and not hazardous to health. It will make it illegal for landlords to discriminate against tenants because they've got children, which happens, or because they're in receipt of benefits, and it will strengthen our enforcement powers. We'll have new investigatory powers to enable us to identify and take action and fine unscrupulous landlords and drive them out of the sector. Now, all this is going to have implications on our private sector team. We hope there will be some new burden funding that comes with it. But otherwise, we will have to look very seriously at the staffing implications that arise out of the Renters' Rights Bill. And finally, the supported housing. Get ahead. The government will publish regulations, which they haven't as yet, which will impose licensing obligations on the local authority, and we need to be clear what's falling on us, what's falling on the county council. There'll be obligations to develop strategic supported housing plans, quantifying existing supply and local need. In fact, in all honesty, a lot of that work is happening already in us saying that we do need more supported housing. I don't know what it's called. Shenton Court? No? Pardon? Shenwood Court. That sort of place which actually helps break the cycle of drug and substance dependency and enables people to move towards independence rather than just throwing them in a council tenancy which immediately breaks down, okay? But anyway, so there are some big challenges afoot, and we are watching them with interest and being ready to plan for them. Sorry, thank you for that extra time.
Thank you very much. It's a really important topic, so time is really important to give to it. It matters to so many of us and our residents. Right, so it's now open to members for questions. I see Councillor Amron, I see Councillor Giorgio, I see Councillor Kazar, I see Councillor Zisman, I see Councillor Sullivan, and myself. So we've got, and the whole committee. So we'll just go in order of what I said. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Alan, yeah, really good slideshow there. And yeah, so I've got a few things, but I'll just start with one question, otherwise we'll be here all night. Re the empty home strategy. So from the figures that I can get, it seems that we've got 1.7% of total properties in Hertsmere are empty, which equates to about 541 long-term empty properties. I just wonder how many of those are Ministry of Defence, because as you know, where you and I live in Bushy, there's a hell of a lot of MOD properties that are empty. And secondly, on the same thing, what is actually being done within the empty home strategy to actually reduce this? Thank you.
Alan,
Yeah, the thing in front of me is 0. Now, I'm not sure that's the case because I'm very familiar with the RAF estate myself. And I know a lot of those properties have been, well, empty for a long time, although I have to say I think that situation is improving. But I'm happy to go away and check that. I really don't believe the MOD are that efficient. Sorry, and the supplementary?
Was what is being done within the empty home strategy to sort of minimise this happening? Because I might be wrong on this, but I understand legally that the council can do something, enforce something if a property is just going to stay empty for forever and ever.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, the empty home strategy introduces levies. Depending on the length of time the property has been empty, they've been increased, and they are going to be more effective. But is it up to 4 times? It's double if they're empty for more than 1 or 2 years. Then it trebles, then it quadruples. So people are going to be paying a lot of council tax for the pleasure of owning an empty home. There's also the stuff on holiday homes. Not that I know how many holiday homes there are in the borough. But and there's probably not that many, but those people are going to have to pay double council tax. So that sort of thing is very effective. But staff in the private sector team are on the case. They liaise very closely with council tax. They send letters to people. They suggest that they let those properties through one of our temporary accommodation schemes. So it's very much in your face, and we do everything to actually bring those properties back into use.
Great, thanks, Anna.
Thank you, Chair. As someone who's experienced living in social rented accommodation and sharing a room with my brother, having sisters in another room and parents sleeping in the living room, I give my thanks to you and your portfolio and the teams that you work with for your report, and also all the work that you're doing to help try and alleviate some of the worst aspects of the housing crisis. Unfortunately, more housing continues to be purchased in the kind of private sector to kind of maximise profit, and that's leading to increases in house prices and rents well in excess of salaries. My question to you is, I understand that when excluding certain people from the register, we're looking at people with assets of over £30,000. Many people are also, sorry, excuse me. I thought that was on silent. Sorry, excuse me. Yep. Many people are also making use of trusts to hide wealth when in order to then be able to access things like housing registers or other help, especially later in life. I was wondering if you're including the use of trusts when calculating if a person is eligible for the housing register. So if they've recently put a lot of their assets into trust, are we then saying, hold on a minute, have you done that in order to increase your chances of being able to get onto the housing register? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As someone just subbing on this thing, something that did catch my eye when you were presenting, Councillor Matthews, was you said you were working closely with Clarion. So I just wanted to know, as from a policy perspective, what's the housing portfolio's policy in terms of liaising with specific ward councillors in terms of what's happening, Clarion properties within specific wards? Because I think if you recall, Councillor Matthews, we had an introductory meeting with Clarion. It's been, what, about a year, more than a year? And then there was supposed to be, follow-up, and there were promises and so on. So what's happened to that aspect of it? Thank you.
Okay, we're meeting with Clarion quarterly. We are definitely making improvements, which I kind of which I went through earlier. They will be offering kind of estate walkabouts and this kind of thing. I think at the end of the day, you have to remember they are a big landlord. Most of their stock is former council stock, which went across in the stock transfer. It's not without its problems. In some ways, we're very lucky that we're no longer the landlord. So we're aware they have got big difficulties to deal with. But having said that, they've got to deal with them. We need to be satisfied that they are taking appropriate action to improve standards, and that they're accessible and answerable, that they turn around voids quickly, all that sort of issue. And I feel that we are getting a better service from them, and we'll be coming out quite soon with some information to all members, which will have some facts and figures about their performance, and facts and figures on how you can contact them and how you can kind of escalate a problem if there is one.
Thank you, Chair. With the Renters' Rights Bill that's due to come in, do we have any mitigations in place at the Council we may see landlords that may wish to sell beforehand or convert their properties to another type of housing revenue, such as HMOs? Have we got a mitigation in place? Because that could be quite a steep incline for the Council to have.
I'll pass that to Emily.
Thank you. I think our homelessness team are certainly seeing that now, and they've been seeing that for a number of months. Landlords, I think, are concerned about the upcoming changes. So at the moment, our negotiations have already started, so we're trying to negotiate when they've served Section 21 notices, because that won't be a thing. So we're doing what we can if someone approaches us as homeless, having been served notice from landlords. We're asking them to consider our Let with Hertsmere scheme, for example. We're trying to maybe bridge the gap, offer different kind of incentives to keep tenants. So we're doing everything we can, but we're very mindful that there is some concerns with the upcoming bill, and landlords are understandably concerned. So we're keeping an eye on it. We're having a landlords forum where we can keep landlords updated. So we're trying to understand it kind of from both sides and provide support for both. Does that answer your question?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, Councillor Matthews. That was a genuinely very good presentation, really well presented. And it's an area that I work in the private residential sector, so I do sort of know quite a lot about this. So I do have a few points. There's no trick questions or anything in there, but it's blatantly obvious that we have a huge shortage of 4-bedroom homes, and I wonder if just taking every opportunity that when HDL do any building, why can't we actually just build some less 4-bedroom homes? Purely because it breaks my heart to see that there was 0 in the correct size 4-bed sort of thing. So that's that point. I think we as an authority may benefit from looking at incentivising people to downsize for all those different reasons, whether they've lost a partner or something. And I think that if we can incentivise them, maybe by an assisted move approach, so you know, really hand-holding and assuring them, you know, perhaps we might have to pay for their removals or something. But I think we should be doing whatever it takes to help someone to move, because the fear of moving is probably the biggest hurdle. So we should really wrap them up in cotton wool. And I think if we could look at maybe an assisted move approach, that might help. Could we then also, if people are willing to downsize, could we prioritise rehousing them in order that we can free up bigger homes, because it is such a bottleneck. On the renters' rights bill, the supply is diminishing at the moment, and actually Councillor Giorgio, in a meeting we spoke in the other day, I agreed with you. On this one I disagree with you, because what the renters' rights bill, you stated it's doing a good job, and whilst it does a good job in its practicalities, what it's not doing a good job at is keeping rental properties in the market. And at the moment, I can't remember the last buy-to-let property that I sold, or the last property that I sold for buy-to-let, and instead we've had an exodus this year of landlords, and Emily's nodding away, and it's so hard because the renters' rights bill has made it so it just penalises landlords, so we're not attracting new ones, we are losing. And the trouble is, simple economics, when we have a low supply, when we've got high demand and a low supply, it pushes prices up. And looking at the figures of the 55k and 45k earning levels, I just went on rental calculator, income calculator. So for 55k, someone earning 55k would mean they can only spend £1,800 rent, and these are people looking for 3 or 4 beds. At the moment, you're going to really struggle to find even a 3-bed for that. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it is not easy. And, you know, probably the people on 45 looking at 1,500 for 2 beds is more realistic. But again, we're seeing that push at the bigger houses, and I just think we need to do anything and everything to free any that we can. And that's it. Thank you.
Well, it's nice to have such agreement, and I I agree with all the points you've made, really. I mean, on the, you know, we desperately need 4-bedroom accommodation. We desperately need more social housing, and we need to shift that balance. But I think the members who had an involvement over a number of years with, well, since they were formed with HDL and HLL, know that it's a financial balance in terms of making the schemes stack up at the end of the day. And, you know, and I appreciate that is the reason why there's as much affordable housing coming through there as there is, and there's not enough social housing. But it's the same issue about the large units. They actually cost more. There's a limit on the kind of amount of cross-subsidy that can go into these schemes. But, you know, we need to look and do whatever we can to actually, I mean, this is the real kind of blockage in the system. You know, if we can release them up at the 4-bedroom, you know, there's a chain of movements that we could then generate. So I absolutely agree. On the under-occupiers, I agree. We need to look at, you know, every possible incentive, and you know, as I said, that there is no question they get a very high priority through the banding system, you know, and we'll do what we can to move them, you know, and we'll be lenient on giving them the extra room if need be, you know, so whatever we can to make it happen, we will do. You know, obviously, if there's, you know, we need to be aware, you know, we can't go around offering them all £10,000 to move, but, you know, potentially you would have to offer something of that kind to actually make it attractive. You know, some authorities, you know, write off rent arrears, you know, which is the way forward. But then again, it's not our money; it's housing association money. So, you know, I agree that we're in a difficult place with landlords. Personally, I don't think that the renters' rights reform is as bad as some landlords fear. I think they can still get possession if they have a genuine need to get possession. So that shouldn't be a disincentive. But, you know, we are working with landlords. I think the landlord forum is next Tuesday. Yeah. So, in fact, you ought to come to that, Councillor. have a personal interest in you being there. So, you know, I agree with all the points.
Can I just come back, because I agree with your agreement of me, but I think with the incentivising of the under-occupiers in the large homes, I don't think you need to make it attractive for them to move. I think you need to make it easy for them to move, because actually just a removals should be no more than 1,500 or something like that. So I think if we can make it easy rather than focus on attractive, that is actually going to make it attractive because it's easy, and that is the main way to approach it. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Councillor Allen, did you want to say a question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Alan, for your presentation. I think we can all see your immense commitment to this portfolio and your passion for the subject, which of course draws on your vast professional expertise when you were an officer in this field previously. So thank you very much for so much detail. In terms of, I think there's obviously a strong consensus about the importance of this, the work to free up larger properties and to keep that chain moving. Is there anything that the best performing authorities in this regard are doing that we haven't done? Are there any tricks of the trade that we haven't quite uncovered? And also, to what extent do we sort of work with our neighbours on this? So with Watford, for example, or Barnet, how hooked up is it for transfers between the boroughs? How easy is it? So as a case study, my own mother, who's 83 and lives in Ealing and has a 3-bedroom social property. So we've thought a lot about whether she can move here or to where my sister lives in Three Rivers. And interesting what Natalie's saying, because she's quite daunted by the prospect. It's an interesting case study. But also, when I began looking into it, how you start is not that easy. It's not that obvious, maybe for an 83-year-old, what your first step is towards achieving this. So I suppose to distill that into a question is, how connected are we with our partner boroughs, our neighbour boroughs, and are there any tricks of the trade we've not quite uncovered or got to the bottom of or copied?
There's a number of different actions which different authorities take and different housing associations take. I think part of our problem is that we're not talking about council tenants. We haven't got a housing revenue account, so we can't dip into the housing revenue account because it doesn't even exist. I know authorities do dip into the housing revenue accounts to actually encourage moves of their own tenants. I think we just have to do some brainstorming, steal whatever idea is around, and just see if we can make it work. Because there are lots of ideas. There is some good practice. I think what community housing operate an incentive scheme. So we need to look at across the board, and Claren have done some work on it as well. Everything is under consideration, and I imagine we'll be bringing a report back at some stage as to how we think we can actually make that work.
No members have got a couple of questions extra, and that's right, but can I also ask a couple of questions now? There's a few things I've said about how good your presentation is, and it is superb, but there's a few things that concern me quite a bit. As you know, the homeless prevention grants, the council has been given nearly £1.2 million. You've mentioned, and we all know, one of the things you said, that homelessness has doubled in the last 5 years in this borough, and it's a major concern to us. But we have used £434,000 to balance a budget on other services. Should that not be ring-fenced and used? And that will make a major indent into our homelessness problem, number one. Number two, you mentioned HDL. Now, we were criticised heavily by those who are now making decisions that we set up this vehicle to provide what I used to call, and it is, unaffordable housing. And we're going to be discussing the peer review, and one of the recommendations is that we now need to know what the priorities of the new, not so new now, coalition are, because they're not clear. But surely, the new coalition, you've said about the demand for social rent, surely the council's main vehicle for providing homes, which is HDL, should be focusing solely on that. I just need to pick up the latest press release, the construction of 11 affordable homes on previously derelict garage site, which is owned by the council. Should that not be a priority of the new coalition? And HDL's priorities are now not in accordance with what I think your priorities are. And then the third question is, you've mentioned quite clearly, and you showed in the slides, affordable rent 4 years ago was 116 homes provided. It's only 48 this year. Social rent 4 years ago was 237 homes. It's only 162 this year. What do you attribute that to?
You know, for the bumper 42 homes that we received this year, I mean that is down to work done by our predecessors, but what we're getting now, and that whole period, which has been on screen, has occurred and been caused by the previous administration. Some good, some not so good. But having said that, I know it's difficult. And anything that we will do, you won't see it next year, and you won't see it the year after, because all these things have got a long lead-in time. So, you know, and we know that. But I take the points that you've made, and what we are doing is we are looking at how we can get more of what we want out of HDL. We're looking at the council's assets across the board. And we're looking at things like garage sites, which could be a huge opportunity to actually produce housing. I have to say there's a real problem in actually accessing social housing grant from Homes England, and the problem is, what do you have to do to actually get that money? And that would be the difference between providing more affordable housing and more social housing. So we're looking at what we have to do to actually attract more, which would enable us to provide more social housing and more social housing of the right size. On the first point you made, personally I don't have a problem with this. The government makes an assessment as to how much they think authorities need to address their homeless problem. And so they've made an assessment as to how much they think we need. We're already spending more than that amount, okay? And we're, in this situation with the budget, whether we have to look at how it balances, which is a process that every administration, yours included, had to go through every year simply to balance the books. But there is no damage done to the homelessness budget. We are still, and we will still spend at a higher level than the government thinks we need to spend on homelessness, without any damage to the service at all. Well, we could do more, but you need to tell me which services you'd want us to cut to enable us to do more. I will argue my corner to actually get more money spent on housing, but it's a Peter and Paul situation again, isn't it? It's a matter of where you want the hit to occur. And frankly, looking at all the services we provide and what our income is, and what the potential shortfall is, I think we make a fair balance at the end of the day, and we do more than is expected of us.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Matthews. So, talking about the Grenfell inquiry thing, obviously at the end, So the government have stated that within their term in office that they're going to fix all the unsafe cladding in the country. I just wondered how many buildings with unsafe cladding do we have in Hertsmere, and what are you aware of that we are doing to try and speed the process up?
Okay, the first thing we're doing is actually getting together a register of all schemes where there may be a problem. Emphasis on the word may. We're aware of one scheme where it is definitely a problem, and the problem is it's fitted into different groups depending on the height of the building. I can't remember what it is. It's probably up to 4 floors and then beyond 4 floors, obviously related to means of escape in fire. So we're going through a process, working with Herts Building Control to actually make sure we're aware of every property where there may be some problem. But there's one particular development where we do have real concerns, and we are actually achieving some movement on that. I mean, there's also the issue with RAC, that we're not clear of how many properties are affected and how serious that effect is. So, but we are going through a process to grade effectively the degree of danger and ensure that relevant action being taken. Personally, I found that the government announcement on the Grenfell Tower problem very disappointing. They're talking about all these properties being remediated, I think, within 4 years. You know, and I think that is kind of totally unsatisfactory. You know, frankly, I wouldn't give a developer any other work in the borough if they owned property which needed remediation until they'd done the remediation. But we are where we are. We will take the action we can with it, and we'll take any action which is in our statutory power to take against these developers. But we are limited in what we can do, and it doesn't appear to be a significant problem. There is one particular development which we have some concern about, but we're making progress on that one.
Great, and just very quickly, it's a very quick question, quick answer hopefully. Following on from that, so you've got one property you've definitely, made aware of. I would trust that we will do everything to ensure as a council that the people living there won't be asked to put their hands in their own pockets to get it rectified.
Yeah, clearly we will do what we can, but I'm not sure. I don't. We won't have the money. It would be wrong to even think about using council finances for a case where a developer has failed to comply with requirements and has allowed that situation to happen. There may be some money available, I think, from the government, but the government have taken the view that it should be the developer to put its own house in order. But it's a matter of keeping the pressure on to make sure that happens.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I wasn't suggesting that we as a council put our hands in our pockets, but it does seem that whilst the government are expecting developers to actually sort it out, we see in the national press, on the news that, so many people across the country are having to they're being sent bills for more money than they're ever going to have, Anyway. No, it answers the question. Thanks, Councillor.
Yeah, no, my view is I think it's absolutely criminal that people are in this situation, where simply the insurance has gone up from $1,200 a year to $4,000 a year for a property they cannot sell and they would love to escape from. I think that is criminal. But in that situation, the insurance premium has now been reduced to £1,700, so it's a lot better than it was. But the real kind of unfairness about the situation is that the developer seems happy for the occupant to pay this increased insurance premium ad infinitum because there's no cost of them in waiting. There's no cost of them in putting it off. And that is a table that we've been banging very heavily, I can assure you.
Thank you.
I think it's Councillor Allen. and then Councillor Sullivan.
On the back to the point of the how do we produce more larger houses, the obvious tension in the planning system is that it's a numbers game. So developers and authorities are under enormous pressure to deliver to hit the targets, and that means that everyone builds 1 and 2 unit homes, and there's little incentive. In fact, a reverse incentive, a disincentive to build larger homes because you won't get your numbers as easily. That's obviously very much a planning question, but I'd be interested in your take on that point. And secondly, I think you've discussed kind of the answer to the question in some ways in the presentation, but I know you've long been interested in the fairness of the system for allocating social housing. And I think before you were a portfolio holder, you began looking into this and asked a lot of questions about whether the allocation process is fair, and more to the point, whether Hertsmere knows whether it's fair and whether it had ever been quantified. And you talked quite a bit about the rebanding of various priorities. But to sum up as a question, what did you find out about whether our allocation system is fair or not? And the changes you've mentioned, do they sort it out or not quite?
Thank you. On the planning question, we are working with planners to voice our concerns about what we need, and in fact what we need is something that we need to ensure that when people make a specific planning application, they are committed and they're forced to deliver on the commitment to provide the mix of accommodation by tenure and by size, which they include in their planning application. So, but an outline planning permission isn't tying them down, so it's got to be the specific that we get. But I mean, that's something that we're fighting for, and we're having those conversations with developers, with planners, with housing associations, so all the people who are involved to get what we want. They know what we want. So that's the best I can answer on that. In terms of the fairness, yes, you're right. I was concerned about the fairness of the system, what I missed when I was skipping through this was that we do a very detailed analysis every year, which we couldn't put up on the screen. It's just too enormous and too much detail for you. I did have concerns that there seemed to be some imbalance between how ethnic groups were faring under the in their success, in successful outcomes, and there were winners and losers, and in some areas it was the white group that were losing, so it was a mixed picture. But I've gone into it in some detail. We have the statistics, and I'm satisfied that there is now a fair outcome. So I'm very pleased we can say that there is no discrimination in our policy. But we've always that is something that you cannot be complacent about. You can't do a one-off check on your policy and say everything's wonderful. It's got to be ongoing, because the situation changes, the population changes, and you've got to ensure that whatever you're doing doesn't unintentionally discriminate against any ethnic group. And that is a case that we are on, and we'll continue to review the policy on that basis.
Councillor Sutton.
Thank you, and I've got a few points if I may, Chair. So the first one is around enforcement. So do we currently have properties that are out of use due to concerns with safety concerns or compliance or otherwise in the sector for social or temporary accommodation? And is that an issue for us at the moment? I didn't see any figures for that. Secondly, surrounding temporary accommodation, I apologise, I missed whether this figure was in the past year or the total currently now, that we've got 115 families in temporary accommodation and 2 in bed and breakfast. Do we have a percentage number, and you may not know this now, I appreciate, how many of those temporary accommodation units are in Borough, and how many of those are actually within the settlements where residents currently live with their support networks, schools, jobs, etc. And what can we do to get towards 100% in our borough capacity of housing people in their own settlements? And are there schemes in place with developers for new developments that we are getting temporary accommodation stocks to us so that we can keep people in borough? And thirdly, a question for officers. What would be your wish list? So what's your largest struggle at the moment? And then I'm just thinking, how can we use our emerging local plan, policies and budgets in the future to really help you with that big struggle? What is your wish list that you need from us? Thank you.
Yeah, I think in terms of TA, we've got the procurement policy, we've got the placement policy, so we want it to be as fair as possible, and if people are placed outside the borough, we want it to be temporary and bring them back as soon as we can, and we want to make sure that where people have got the greatest dependence on living in the borough, then those people. But we are talking about very few outside the borough, and Emily will give you a figure in a few seconds, I think. In terms, your first point, you're talking about properties being out of action, and it wasn't clear what you're talking about, and why you're talking about public sector or private sector.
I suppose across the whole, with enforcement, there must be some properties where it may be a private landlord or a social housing provider that has a property that may have too much mould or a safety issue within that property, which means that it can't be rented out or in use. Is there an issue with that at the moment? Because there must be some landlords that do struggle to keep to compliance with electrical testing or gas safety or mould, black mould issues. And is that an issue at the moment where we do have properties empty in the borough? And that could be from providers such as Clarion, or it could be from our own stocks or from private rental. I just wondered if that was a problem at the moment.
Sorry, I have to say that I don't think it's a major problem in terms of properties being uninhabitable because of the level of damp or mould in the property. But if properties are unoccupied, then we would pick that up through council tax records. And the private sector manager is very much on the case in being in contact with any property which has been empty for a certain period. Obviously, there's natural turnover, and you don't expect properties to be relet the next day when people leave. But he will be in contact with those owners, find out what's going on. He'll be putting schemes in front of them which may help them access grants for any improvement work to take place, and also talking about them actually coming within the orbit of one of our temporary accommodation schemes. So there is a lot of work happening in that direction. But on the question of where is the TA, Emily?
Thank you. So we have around 20% of our TA households out of borough. I would say some of those, there will be a need for them to be out of borough, and some of them there isn't the availability in borough. So then once there is availability, we'll bring them back in.
And then officers, your wish list, what do you need? What would be your, what's your biggest concern, and what do we need to really address?
I think it is, I'll keep it simple, is the level of housing need. So obviously Councillor Matthews' presentation is largely focuses on the housing register, and I think has addressed some of those biggest need is that the need for larger properties, for example, our homelessness demand, as Councillor Matthews said, has significantly increased. Enforcement has, so it's a perfect storm in terms of that level of demand has gone through the roof, in all aspects of housing. There's lots of things that we're doing to try and minimise. So we're adding we've added resource into the homelessness team, for example. The allocations policy we hope will address and prioritise those most in need, recognising that we're unable to help everybody in housing need. So I think from my perspective, they're our biggest challenges. Maggie, do you want to?
Thank you very much. I think it's very interesting, and I think it does show the very special circumstances to me of maybe greenbelt building is to provide, if it helps and alleviates this housing need. I think it really does show the demand is necessary. Any more questions at all? No. Councillor Matthews and your team, phenomenal. Thank you very much. It was really well presented, informative and interesting to us all. And I'd just like to thank you very much for your time and effort. And members will be happy to note the reports. And we will decide about actions when we talk about the work programme. But thank you very much indeed. So that leads us now to agenda item 7, the local government...
Sorry, excuse me, Chair. One thing I forgot to say was that we proposing to take a report to Council in April. Is that right? Cabinet in May. Oh, sorry. Cabinet in May, and to get approval to consult on this allocation policy document, and we'll then be bringing it back to full Council in September? Hopefully September. Yeah. So we're at the start of a process.
Has this allocation policy document, what stage is that at, though? It's fully written, is it, and available? So we may want to have a look at it as policy review beforehand, actually. It might be part of our work programme, but thank you very much. Right, so we're now going to move on to agenda item 7, Government Association Corporate Peer Challenge Action Plan Update. Hilary is here to give us, Hilary Shade is here, Head of Partnerships, Community Engagement and Housing, to give us a verbal update on the progress against the action plan, which was attached to our papers, and I did ask today that actually we all got the peer review as well, just to inform us again how the action plan came about. Hilary.
Thank you, Chair. This item was requested the day before, this committee was the day before the peer review report and the action plan came to full council, which is why I haven't done a full report, because you've had it at full council. So it was obviously agreed on the 22nd of January, and we are kind of working through the action plan. I don't know if you want me to go through each recommendation, give you a quick update as to where we are, but I can do that, and then happy to take any questions. So for recommendations 1, 2, and partially of 3, which is this piece around framing our priorities, framing our vision, and framing redoing our corporate plan under the new administration. We have we've been working with the Local Government Association to identify some resource and support to us as a council to move those recommendations forward, and we have some consultants appointed who are going to do a series of workshops with the Cabinet and the senior management team, and then some joint workshops to take those pieces of work forward. What that will mean, unfortunately, is our timescale, our timeframe will slip, because it was quite difficult to find dates and times that would work for the Cabinet and the consultant and officers. So where we are now is the Cabinet have some workshops happening at the beginning of April, senior management team in May, and then some joint work happening in June. So it will push back some of this prioritisation and the corporate plan and our kind of way of working going forward. So, and then also linked to that is the recommendation under 2 around 3, under the review of governance arrangements. And Alan was there a second ago, and now he's slipped off. I thought Alan was there. Not Alan Withrick, not Alan. So Alan Withrick and Harvey are looking at some of that decision-making cycle, because part of the peer review said that our decision-making cycle was quite extended, looking at all the different member panels we have that exercise some form of scrutiny over and above what the scrutiny committee do. And the intention is that that needs to be in place before the annual council in May, because that's when members are allocated to the respective committees and panels. So Harvey Patterson and Alan Withrick are currently working on that. Under recommendation 3, there was a recommendation around independent member of the audit committee. That is completed. There was advertisements for the independent member of audit committee and the independent person for standards committees. Those interviews were undertaken in January, and both recruitment panels prepared recommendations for full council to ratify those appointments in February, which has been done. So those posts will be in place now for the next 4 years. And the purpose of that is to offset their term of office against the council elections, so that it provides the best level of continuity. So that one is a green and completed. The next part of recommendation 3 was around incorporating benchmarking information into our performance reports. And again, that has been added straight away. So we've using the LG Inform benchmarking data where it's available and mapping that against our performance reports, which we started as of Q3, which will have been the end of December for Q3 for 24-25. So that's already in place. The recommendation 4 was around really developing the elected member development programme and learning and looking at all of those core training and modules. And again, that's a piece of work that is ongoing with Alan Withrick. Recommendation 5 was about adopting a case management system for elected members. Lee Gallagher, Customer Service Operations Manager, has done a lot of work looking at the existing functionality of our existing systems, like the CRM system that's already in place, and has identified some possible solutions to that. So he's going to be doing some demonstration with stakeholders, and Councillor Shenton and Councillor Chalice are both going to be looking at, is this sort of meeting what members were hoping to get, rather than go out and buy an entirely new system. Let's try and use the systems that we already have in place. The recommendation 6 was about looking at our wholly owned subsidiary companies. In terms of Elstree Studios, I think there is an agreed strategy going forward. So what we've done is, again, through the support of the LGA, we've got some free of charge work happening with local partnerships who are going to undertake a 6-day assessment of the governance and future of HDL, and that work has commenced this week and will go on to next week, where there will be there's a whole spreadsheet, and that they're doing some desktop exercise looking at the business case, looking at the shareholders investment committee minutes, and they're going to interview a number of members of the board. They're also going to shareholders investment committee, and Councillor Giorgio, I believe that you're going to be invited in your capacity as chair of audit as well to that. So that work is currently in progress. The financial strategy, that's obviously was being linked to the budget process, but also now will need to be reflective of any implications that arise out of local government reorganisation. So Matthew Bunyan is leading on that, and Liz from my team has offered to support that because they're struggling in terms of management capacity in the finance team. Recommendation 6, which is all about the council doing everything we can to ease our recruitment and retention challenges. So there's a lot of work going on in this area, and Claire Noble, the head of HR, and the personnel committee have churned through quite a lot of work in this area. So the hybrid working policy was considered by the personnel committee at the beginning of February. A lot of further work has now been done on that, and it is coming forward to the April 17th of March committee, and we've got the policies there. We're proposing all sorts of workshops, staff messaging around that, so it will come actually fully into implementation on the 1st of May. The senior management restructure you considered last week at council, so that work is now completed and will equally be in place from the 1st of April. The ongoing review of pay and grading structure has also been, a report's been prepared for personnel committee, and I think that we've done there's been a review of that with the East of England LGA, and I know that we're just looking at the financial implications of implementing that. There is in terms of the development programme for middle managers to become future leaders of the organisation, again, a lot of work's been going forward on that. So we have a draft development programme that we've actually discussed at senior management team this morning, but we're already putting a number of our middle managers through the District Council Network's Future Leadership Programme. So that work is ongoing. Appraisals, that's an ongoing thing. Communication between staff and senior managers. We've implemented a programme of staff briefings, so that's ongoing. We're about to launch our all-staff survey, which we do on an annual basis, so we're about to do that during March and April. Then the other one in that area was around encouraging us to contribute more to trade journals, enter awards, hold more staff events. So we're each that was kind of put down as a consultation comms and asset management thing, but it's for all departments to promote the work that they're doing. We did put a couple of our comms products forward for LGA awards, but we weren't successful. We put forward the campaign that we were running for our recruitment and retention campaign, because we've done a lot of work in that area. We've done all the videos, we've linked to the LGA's national recruitment film. You'll see a lot on our social media that we've been promoting. We've got a microsite set up, and that's all linked to the LGA's Make a Difference local government recruitment campaign, which is quite nice because that fits in really nice with our corporate values that we just adopted before the LGA adopted that for their recruitment campaign. So we put that one forward, and we also put the another one around the waste comms. Then in terms of recommendation 10, the recommendation, well, there's a recommendation around reconfiguring the reception area. Asset management are working on that, and I know that some drawings had been drawn up, but I think that we'd had some queries about those, so that's gone back to the architects for more work, but I think it's then going straight out to procurement so that we do that work. In the next one was around training for staff who deal with difficult customers and training for managers to support staff who deal with difficult customers. There's a whole schedule of training schedule for early March, and where people can't do that training in March but they want to do it, we're having a holding list, and we'll do some mopping up sessions for that. And then the final one was around corporate response to incidents relating to staff safety more widely, and that's just about us making staff aware where we have put people on a potentially violent persons register, which we hold, or where we've taken action against individuals, perhaps to bar them from the building or anything else. So stuff to give the staff the comfort that we are actually dealing with a personal safety. It is a matter of concern that we are keeping it in observation. So that's kind of very much a whistle-stop tour. It is work in progress. Things are progressing, but I'm happy to take any questions on the wider report if there are any, if I can cast my mind back to it. But
I'm sure we've got lots of questions. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Hilary, for that. Right, Councillor Giorgio first.
Thank you, Chair. Just two questions, really. You mentioned in item 5 about the new customer management system, or the current one that we're using, and whether or not we adopt a new one or not. I just would like to ask if we can make sure that we look at the interoperability of the system we're currently using and any future one that we procure, so that we can ensure that we can use that system alongside our website potentially, or a future My Hertsmere app, in a way that allows our residents to interact with us quickly and easily online, on their phone or whatever it might be, report things to us, it can go in our system and they can get updates without having to call us or kind of, go back and forth to find out if something's been fixed, and they can see timelines and expected delivery and things like that, because I think that would really unlock the both the ability for us to also be able to properly track how quickly we're doing certain things in our council, but also it would give us much better transparency for our residents in terms of our wait times, our lead times, in terms of where we're fixing things or not. Also on item 10 around the employee safety, most organisations will have some kind of initial turnstile system or something to ensure that everyone entering or leaving the premises is being accounted for, both from a security perspective but also from things like a fire safety perspective. Do the new plans for the reception area incorporate a method for us to do this? Thank you.
So just in terms of the recommendation 5 was around a case management system specifically for elected members. However, part of the purpose of the kind of the reorganisation and the creation of a head of service is about driving that transformation of the business. So that work will be picked up under those new roles. In terms of the building, we can't put turnstiles in. So because there's also the access to the NHS, so they have to have direct access, and that is mental health services, so we don't want to put any additional barriers that stop people accessing those services. That isn't there, but there is there's a slight, they're looking at a reduced access way in, so that's how it's working. The NHS aren't prepared to put somebody on our reception. They want people to have that direct access through, but there'll be a kind of better observation of people coming in and out of the building by the configuration that they're doing.
Turnstiles or no, is there not a way that we can ensure that we have a record of everybody who's entering or exiting the building, both from a security and fire safety perspective?
So in terms of the staff that work here and everything else, there's obviously the whole swipe system, but we can't have that in place for access to the NHS. So we have in terms of security, you know, guests coming in have to register at reception and all of that thing, but we're not able to do that for the NHS. And the way we operate our fire safety is we don't work on records of who is in the building. We sweep the floors, and that's how we do it, and that's our fire safety approach. We've got a series of fire marshals who, when there is a fire alarm, we sweep the floors and report back for each floor that it's cleared. That's how it works. But I'm sure that the head of asset management would love to come and have a more detailed conversation with you than I can.
Thank you. I see Councillor Sullivan, then I've got a couple.
Thank you. Just having a look through the recommendations, I think at least 5 of them have some kind of input where once this has all been implemented, we're going to need some kind of communication. So have we got enough capacity in our communications departments to be able to get this information either to residents, members or other members of staff? And is that maybe a future risk where we've got a lot happening? So the future vision, we need to be able to communicate that out in a certain way, or with strategic vision, the financial plan, or training. And is there a way that we can support the communications team in being able to deliver all of that?
Obviously, capacity is always going to be an issue with the communications team. We do currently have some additional resource, but at any one time, there's a lot of communications work that's going on. At the moment, you know, there's an awful lot happening about local government reorganisation that we are going to be needing to get out. So, yeah, I mean, we'd always welcome more resource, but that's quite difficult. So that is part of the reason why we now, on things like press releases, we always have that little bit about, you know, amplifying the message through everybody's different channels. So that's really welcomed where members help us amplify that through their own channels. But I think we've still got some of the, you know, that's one of the reasons why things like Hertsmere News, which is just about to be distributed from 19th of March, is one of those things that we've always protected through the budget process because of not trying to just rely on digital communications, so that we have got some sort of paper-based things as well. So yeah, I mean, it's always a capacity risk for us because there's just so many different things going on at any one time within the council that do need communication.
Thank you. I've got 3 or 4 little questions to ask. So going through the peer review on page 5, it talks about that the council is concerned about cabinet members and all 3 of the council statutory officers holding senior roles in one or more of the companies, and it recommends the council commissions an expert review of the governance arrangements around this. Number 1, who are the experts and is this being done? Next question is page 6 of the peer review, which is quite serious. It talks about staff and staff retention. Now, it doesn't talk about in detail about the reasons about pay. It says it's wrapped up in issues of pay, but it says the main issues is capacity is being lost as a result of current approaches to people management. And it says the overwhelming view of staff is fundamentally about trust and what people are valued for in the organisation. Where in these recommendations is that being dealt with? And then page 18, which is what is a concern that we also have. There's a new partnership. We've never had a partnership, or as we call it, a coalition, a partnership. And it makes quite clear there that officers aren't sure about the direction because there's so many different plans. And one of them is they don't know about the partnership administration, the manifestos and the other strategies. When you talk about you're going to set up the only one in recommendation 2 I can see to that is Corporate Plan 25-26. Is that going to incorporate all those different plans, including the partnership administration?
Shall I start with that one first? That is that piece of work that I've just described in terms of we've appointed some consultants to come and support us to do that piece of work. And one of the first things that we've been doing with the senior management team is collating a whole council, what Liz and I call a whole council work programme. So it's identifying under our different existing priorities, all the different actions that are being undertaken and identifying, has that come from the partnership plan? Has that been a motion to council? Is it part of our business as usual? So we are trying to collate all of the work across all of the departments that the council are doing against those themes. And the purpose of these workshops with the cabinet and with the senior management team is around setting those to a manageable set of priorities for the organisation. So that's what that piece of work is about. In terms of the item around trust, that's again looking at the staff. So the staff survey will be exploring that a bit further. It's about hybrid working. The hybrid working thing was a particularly thing for staff, but also sorry, I've lost my train of thought. Sorry, I've lost my train of thought there. It'll come back to me. And then in terms of the governance piece, that piece of work is being done by future partnerships, because they'll be looking at the governance and and that's why they're looking specifically at HDL, because that's an example where you have the 151 officer and things.
Thank you. Any further questions? If there's none, I've actually got one, because I think it's quite important then, which I was going to leave to the end, because it concerns us, I think, is recommendation 3, a review of the governance arrangements to include decision-making cycles, but more importantly, the scrutiny and the role and function of member panels. Is the scrutiny committee or scrutiny members going to be involved in that, or is it going to be people who haven't been involved in scrutiny?
But again, this is a piece of work that Harvey and Alan are looking at, and my understanding it's more around when we set out the performance management framework, we listed all the different member panels where scrutiny effectively happens outside scrutiny, and I think the question was about should we reduce the number of those panels, because there's scrutiny should be here. So I can take that back. I don't have a specific answer for that.
Well, I think I need to go a little bit more in detail. It's something that concerns me a little bit on the recommendation 3 was, it says in a context, it's all of recommendation 3 is in a context of overview and scrutiny, currently lacking clarity of purpose and depth of understanding around the potential it can offer. Now, we are the members of scrutiny. They are concerned about that. Maybe we should be interviewed and asked what we mean, why that has been an outcome and what we think scrutiny is and what we're empowered to do.
I would just say that my understanding of how that came from the meetings that were had with all members and with the scrutiny chairs as part of the peer review consultation process. So I'll take that back to Harvey in terms of engaging with scrutiny around that.
Yeah, because we did, I think, we did identify that, but it's the outcome and how we overcome that is important. And I think we need our views. Yeah, Councillor Simon.
Yeah, and I think going on from that, with the LGA, there is an amazing amount of resource that's available to us, and actually where we can go above and beyond the scrutiny and what actually our role can be within all of our committees here in Operations Review that we're probably not exploring to its fullest, and it's knowing from the LGA all those tiers of scrutiny and how we can actually delve more in depth through our panels.
Point. Councillor George.
Yeah, I just also wanted to add, and I agree with what Councillor Sullivan said here, but also that we are making or exploring recommendations that we could be making to the Cabinet and around certain items. It's great that we get to see them and we get to ask questions and kind of and kind of scrutinise them in that way, but it would be good to see us being potentially involved more in coming up with solutions or exploring the problems that we're facing, and not necessarily just scrutinising decisions that have already been made, but rather working with the administration to kind of develop solutions that could, or maybe perhaps they hadn't considered. Yeah, thank you.
I think that's an absolutely excellent point. It is, isn't it? Because we're being told a lot of information, which is great, but obviously they're thinking about the future and there may be concerns or they can't work out other ways of doing it, or they want to consider different options. And we are the committee that should be considering that. And I think that, and it will make it a very interesting agenda for us as well, rather than hearing presentations as great as they are like tonight's. But I think we need to be slightly solution driven as well. I think that would be useful. Thank you. Any more questions on that topic? Hilary Shades, thank you very much indeed. Thank you for that. Members note that. And we will then move on to agenda item 8, which is linked to the final bits of the conversation, which is our forward planning programme and committee work, which is attached in our papers. It's on page, I've no idea, but it's somewhere there. 37. Yes, it's on page 37, 38 onwards. And we've got a little bit of time because I think I'd like to explore just in a little bit more detail about task and finish groups. Items now, we're about to start a new administrative year. This is our last meeting, I think, of this administrative year. Hopefully we'll all be back on, our leaders will put us back on, because I think it's nice to keep uniformity, and we're all learning a lot. And now we're halfway through the cycle. It may be a good idea for us to think about, we've heard from all the cabinet members, we now know what the council, the direction they're planning on going, etc., to do some task and finish groups or plan them for next year. I can ask Alex to explain to us what task and finish groups can be, or we have been sent the details from a review which Councillor Newmark did now 3 years ago. I think they can be quick and short, just 3 hours in an afternoon. You scope it beforehand, you then have the witnesses or whoever you want to talk to come to it, and then you come to a decision then, and that goes then to the full scrutiny group like we are to consider recommendations and go to full cabinet. So it doesn't need to be massively time consuming unless we want to consider it in more detail. But I think there are, and it follows what Councillor Giorgio says, there's things that we could be doing for our own ideas that we see, and best practice out in other councils that we can then put forward to the Cabinet as an idea. And I think that may be the context of that recommendation 3, but I wanted to just, that we need to now be a bit more proactive in our policy. It's not just review, and I think the title of the committee is wrong. It shouldn't be policy review. Maybe it should be something like policy review and forward thinking or formation or ideas, but more it's too backward looking and not forward looking. And I think our committee is meant to be forward looking. We do meet with the Cabinet once a year, but they haven't been. I think the Cabinet also needs to be involved in this, as you said, Councillor Giorgio, the administration do, and they're meant to be giving us ideas they're thinking about, and they aren't. Anyway, on that, we've got quite a busy work programme, as we can see, already planned. I thought that we would ask Councillor Oakley to come back to us to the next meeting. What page is that, by the way? Where's our work programme, actually? Oh, yes. Thank you very much. So page 45 of our programme is that our first meeting is planned to be Thursday, the 5th of June, assuming full council says the dates or agrees the dates, but I think they are. And that is just that is a portfolio update from Street Scenes, Park, Leisure and Culture. Councillor Myers, there is nothing else on that. So are we happy that also said to me, and it's not your fault for certain, but Councillor Matthews gave us his presentation in advance, which helps us greatly. Councillor Oakley must come, please, with a presentation in advance so we can formulate our ideas and questions to her. And then it's quite full up, as you can see. Is there any items or any ideas that members have that they'd like? Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Chair. I know myself and Councillor Allen went quite in depth when we had Councillor Richards here before, and we were talking about communication around the new food waste rollout. And it's disappointing where I know we have many portfolio holders here and we give an amazing ideas, and we gave a recommendation that we would really love to have had maybe some oversight or proofing of communications that go out to our residents, because we know our residents quite well. And it would have been nice before the Hertsmere News got its final proof to be delivered in a week and a half time, that we saw what that vision and that, that resident journey is for this new food waste scheme, because we don't know if it's quite aligned to maybe what we feel our residents would engage with and understand the whole process, or is there an error, or, I don't think we always understand the whole process. So I think that was something that I know a few of us wanted to kind of deep dive into, is that process on how we make sure that we get the best out of the communications for residents.
Yes, well remembered. It certainly was, and it's quite important because there has been also information that's not been highlighted even in the recent food waste rollout. And I think that's right. So how do we suggest we would just do a quick review of that or move forwards with that? Because I think it is important that we get member input into communications beforehand. As you said, quite rightly, we see it as residents as well, whereas officers don't always see it in that way.
Well, it's a slightly different question because that's all happened now. And I think maybe the question is, why didn't it happen? And what do we do in future? Because I think when we discussed that, I think we also raised a broader point of member involvement in comms, whatever the issue is. So maybe the thing that we do, perhaps, is look at that issue more broadly about should there be some member input or review or feedback on comms, not just for food waste, but for other stuff.
That's right. It was just an example that even then it hadn't been taken on board. So Councillor Sullivan, did you want to?
Yeah, so I think maybe what we need is how we develop a framework on if, say, scrutiny feel that we've got a big project coming up, can we have oversight of that compact that's going out or being developed so that early on we can identify what we believe may be a risk, or other members may have ideas, or, I know Bushy and Pottersbar, we have residents that maybe need more thorough information through their doors. And for example, with the leaflet that went out with the silver bin, it said you can get your caddy from a collection point, but it didn't tell us where they were. They had to go to a website. But we could have foresaw those kind of small bits of detail. So maybe a framework for projects on how we take them through start to finish, and where members could have input.
I think that's great. So they'll be brought in, the comms portfolio holder. So coming into my head now is that we could set up 1 or 2 hours for a quick task and finish group. We ask Democratic Services to collate all the comms packs that have gone out in the past 12 months or 24 months. And then we look at them in that task and finish. We come up with ideas why we think it should have been done different or a different way. And then we bring the portfolio holder to the next task and finish just for an hour to get their input. And then we come up with recommendations. Anyone want to volunteer to join this task and finish group?
Well, I suppose it'd be a bit mean if I didn't after all that, wouldn't it?
So I suggest Councillor Sullivan, Councillor Allen and myself, it would be a good idea. I'm thinking we should do it in the next municipal year. May, we'll set some times up and we'll ask Alex Moore to start collating the evidence for the comms packs. Okay, great, and we'll set some times up.
I would like you to narrow that down, because just collating all that information will put quite an additional burden on the comms team, and I know that the leader has a view on. We do have a process where portfolio holders and the portfolio, relevant portfolio of whatever the item is involved in that process, and it's around not designing all our comms through committee. I think that there's a concern around.
But sorry,
around
Hilary,
that.
members of my committee
Yes.
illustrated problems with communications previously and at this one, which is why we want to just do this quick, in a positive manner for certain, quick comms task and finish. I'm not going to be stopped by what you just said, sorry. And that's not what, otherwise that is blocking
You
scrutiny.
don't need to review every single bit of comms. You just have the
packs.
6 back copies of the Hertsmere News.
That's right, and the literature that went out for the food and the the green waste even, that's it.
All right, that's fine.
Yeah.
Sorry, when you said the last 12 months have come, there's
No.
been a lot of campaigns, so
Okay.
that's what
Right.
was, that's what was.
Okay, you're right. I get that. That's true.
Yeah, I think it is about those reviewing some major campaigns, but also that's not a reflection on the comm team's work, because this is it's more for me, in my mind, when I think about this, where the portfolio holders have set up these projects and how it all interlinks, what we know we want to achieve, but how we've communicated it, because ultimately they've given the information for how that's being delivered. The comms team are doing the packs based on what they're being told to deliver. So I think it's that little middle bit that we want to look at to make sure that errors are minimised, and that will be more cost effective and take time. That will be much more efficient for the comms team than us going, oh, there's an error on that or an error on that, and it'll be much more
the last
efficient.
thing they want is, and this is what's been happening, I know from Councillor Sullivan for certain, and other beady-eyed councillors, is the comms comes out, and then there's concerns with it, and then they have to reissue something, and we want to prevent that. Councillor Kazza.
Just a quick query. Is this open for people in the ops review also, or is it just for policy review, task and finish group?
I think we don't want to do this fully by committee, so I think we'll keep it to 2 members or 2 or 3 members here. Yeah, I mean, if anyone's got interest or you want to input it with pleasure, we're not going to stop, but we want to get this quick task and finish as our first one, and that's a great idea. Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Any other topics? I know Councillor...
Sorry, did I butt in there? Well, why don't we do... Is there scope for something on tonight's big talking point, which is the freeing up of larger houses? That very good idea about helping with moves, for example. I mean, maybe that's not quite the right focus, but there are lots of ideas. It's an interesting talking point, and I think that's quite good material for us.
Absolutely. Do you have any in particular then that I think it is? There's a lot to do with housing and trying to alleviate housing we can do, and temporary accommodation, etc.
Well, I think particularly it was about encouraging and making easier and incentivising downsizing.
So
through the transfer schemes. The stuff Natalie was saying, basically.
Yeah.
I think that would be really helpful, because the next big strategy that we're going to look at is a downsizing strategy about how we can work with the housing associations and everything else, because as Councillor Matthews said, we've done the empty home strategy, we've done the homeless strategy, we're doing the allocations policy, and that's the next piece of juicy work that the team are going to start looking at. So that would be really timely and helpful.
Great. How good is this? We're now coming up with ideas. This is great. So do we suggest the title of this task and finish will be Ways to Incentivise Downsizing, which I think is to inform the strategy. Right. I think obviously Councillor Sisman, you should lead this task and finish. Any other members would like to join? Councillor Georgia, I think that's great. Anyone else or anyone you think you might know in... Mark, Councillor Amron, fantastic. That's really good.
Put me on the short list.
Well, you can join it. We'll tell members when it's going to meet, etc. And then we'll tell all of our members who want to come along. But Councillor Sussman, can I ask you then to liaise with Alex for the next year's? I think that's... So when is the strategy due? What's the time scale, Hilary? Even better.
And then
Great.
we'll look at
And also, as I mentioned to Councillor Matthews, about the allocation policy documents. Do you think that should come to us before it becomes a paper going to Cabinet? Is it something that we might be interested in? Especially we've been talking about, I think you mentioned about lump sum and income and allocations. Is that a paper we'd like to see before it goes, or are we happy for it to go to Cabinet?
Or in between the Cabinet, while it's going within that consultation phase,
Yeah.
I
I think we should. I'd like
So
that
we'll
to
have
be
a
brought-
draft.
A draft. Thank you. Any other task and finish, we think? Or should we get on with these two and see how it goes? I actually believe that Councillor Sussman's one, once that's we've gone to that one, there may be others within the housing, with what we heard tonight, we might like to look into. I think, Councillor Arling, you're right, so that would be a good idea. Excellent. Anything else? No, we'll move on to agenda item 9. Any other business? There's no any other business for me. The future meetings, well, I'd like to thank my team here, all of you. I'd like to thank, obviously, Alex Moore for all his help, and Hilary Shade, who's our senior officer involved in policy review. Thank you all for your input over the past year. I think we're getting better. We're getting more, we understand it more, and I think what was just been shown in the past item shows that we are going to have real good input into policy, etc. So the next meeting is planned at 7 o'clock on Thursday, the 5th of June, 2025. This date, along with other meeting dates, will be confirmed at the annual council meeting on the 14th of May, 2025. And at 20:51, I declare the meeting closed.